This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Tuesday, July 21st, 2015. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report here in beautiful Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm Doug Hagmann at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. Folks, it's our job to bring in the news that propels the headlines, the news that is shaped and twisted and hidden this amid this funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival we call the corporate media. We do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. We want to thank all the new listeners for checking in from all over the world. For new listeners, folks, we broadcast live Monday through Friday, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. It hasn't changed. Our home base on the internet is Hagmann and Hagmann.com. Almost doubted myself for a moment. Yes. Anyway, from there, folks, check out our newly designed website. I'd like to thank JD for all of his hard work in revamping the website. Also, under Resurrection, being revamped, HomelandSecurityUS.com. Now, two websites can serve distinctly different purposes, although there will be cross promotion. Hagmann and Hagmann for the show, Homeland Security US for the data and DB content. You know what I mean. I'll just maybe I should just talk slower, right? Folks, tonight we've got a special program for you planned out. We were able. How many people out there saw that hideous, and I mean hideous and evil expose from Planned Parenthood? Now, people might think, well, wait a minute. Hey, with all this stuff you got going on, Jade Helm, Russia, etc., etc., the economy, why talk about this? Well, because this speaks directly to the marketing of the evil in this country. This gives you a glimpse of the evil behind the satanic elements pushing the satanic agenda. Before I go any further, let's bring Joe on. Joe, actually,
Great to
it's
be
he
here.
that brings me on.
Yeah, great to be here. I'm having a little trouble trying to bring Bob on. We're doing this over Skype, and
Okay.
somehow Mac computers and Skype are completely different than any other Skype. And I don't even. We're having a hard time adding. I guess you have to add a friend contact or add a contact to add them to a group call. So I can't add him to the call until he responds to the contact request, even though I just talked to him on Skype right before the show.
Okay. Hey,
So
Bob, if you can just
what we're
respond to
gonna
the
do,
contact request.
I don't know if he's listening.
All right.
I can call his phone.
All right. Well, wait a second. Wait a second. Before you do that, well,
I can do it on or off air.
why don't you take a moment and do it off air, and I'll take care of some housekeeping, and then
Okay,
because
because I was
you're the
typing to him in here, he doesn't see it. So,
okay.
but yeah,
You're the guy that knows how to do this stuff.
it's
I
gonna
don't
be
know.
a great show tonight. So let me go get Bob.
All right. Be right back. All right. Anyway, so tonight we've got a guy, interesting, very interesting man. It's his name is Bob Enyart, Enyart. Folks, you can go to hagmanandhagman.com on the right hand side there. There is a link to his website, and that is kgov.com. Okay, that is his uh, website. It's Bob Enyart Live, and he's very well. If you look him up on Wikipedia, they describe him as an American talk radio host and author, pastor of the Denver Bible Church. He's best known for buying nearly $16,000 worth of O.J. Simpson memorabilia, um, for the reason of benefiting Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman back in 1999, which I find this interesting. Wikipedia, how they do things, right? And not the most accurate necessarily, or the most, it just has a lot of, well, anyway. But Bob is very, very articulate and knows the story on the homosexual agenda, the abortion agenda, the really the entire architecture of the satanic agenda. And that, folks, is why Bob is going to be such a great guest when we get him hooked up here. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to have, hang on just 1 second here. We've got a tremendous hum here, Joe. All right. Well, he's busy working on the other computer. Anyway, tomorrow night, we're going to have Steve Quayle and Pastor David Langford. And I should note tonight on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, Steve Quayle is going to be on for the entire show, 3 hours. The guest slot. Steve Quayle tonight on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. All right, thank you for.
Okay, sorry about
you
that.
just made my eardrums bleed as
We
you
got
picked
it.
that
We
up.
got it. We got it.
All right. So definitely tune in to Coast to Coast AM tonight. Listen to Steve Quayle, and tomorrow night, flying right off of Coast to Coast AM, Steve Quayle and Pastor Langford, and then Friday, Ted Brewer will be on, and. Folks, Terry Nichols last night, I mean, did you enjoy that? The last 10 minutes of the show? My goodness, what a guy. Had a long conversation with Terry Nichols after the show, extended into the wee hours of this morning. And I got to tell you, he's going to be coming back and providing us a lot of information in the format that he can best be most effective. So all of this is all great. But with us right now, according to Joe, and I take him at his word, is Bob Enyart from kgov.com. That's his primary website. His secondary website, and folks, really, let me tell you something. If you want to know where the person you might think is maybe you admire Billy Graham or Sarah Palin or Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush, or maybe you think Rick Santorum is good when it comes to being pro-life, Sarah Palin pro-life or whatever. You might want to think again. ProLifeProfiles.com. That's ProLifeProfiles.com. Gives you the real story behind the people who say they're pro-life, but you might want to take another look. That's ProLifeProfiles.com, as well as KGOV or KGov.com for Mr. Bob Enyart. And Bob is not only a talk show host and an author, but he's also, I'm thinking I might have mentioned this, a pastor of a church in Denver, Colorado. With us, Mr. Bob Enyart. Bob, glad to have you.
What an honor, Doug. What an honor to be on with you and your son, Joe. It's been a long time coming. We love what you guys do. We're out here in Denver, Colorado, on the most powerful Christian radio station in America. It's a 50,000 watter out of Denver. And we've been on for 24 years, 5 days a week, and we've known about you guys forever. Our church members are Hagmann and Hagmann fans, so thank you for what you do.
Oh, wow. That's great to know, and thank you for what you do as well. And you know, you as I was going through your website and the broadcasts and the sermons, and I've got to tell you, you cover a whole lot of ground, and you really, man. Plus,
well, we sure do.
And plus, yes, go ahead, sir.
I'd love to respond to two things that you brought up already. One is Sarah Palin. I mean, I know she's not exactly in the headlines, but it'll help the audience realize how important it is to be faithful to God and to the public in really doing our due diligence to make sure if we endorse someone that they actually have a godly worldview. And Sarah Palin does not. But the second thing is, you know, you started out talking about abortion. And if I could just say why abortion is wrong. Abortion is wrong because it's a baby. And it's always wrong to intentionally kill a baby. And that's because children are made in God's image, and God said, do not kill the innocent. So that's it. That's why abortion is wrong. Abortion is wrong because it's a baby. Yeah, because it's a baby.
I mean,
children are made in God's image, and God said, do not kill the innocent.
You know, isn't it interesting, Bob, how the media and other people use the English language. They pervert the English language. I use the example, and most people know about this, obviously. It's not gay marriage. It's a homosexual union. I mean, gay marriage is impossible
Right.
Even if you take it
It's an
literally, okay?
oxymoron.
Gays. Yeah, exactly. And the marketing of evil to Americans and to the people in the West using a the perversity of our language is just unbelievable. It's not a tissue. It's not a fetus. It's a human being. It's a baby. You know. Right. So anyway,
Well,
sorry, but you're right.
when you just, and we're on a third topic, but all these are so vital, Doug. You just mentioned what people call homosexual marriage. The way we present this is that something referred to as the Supreme Court issued an opinion on something called homosexual marriage, and that opinion should be rejected by everyone. Not only our lesser magistrates, our governors and mayors and city council members, our senators and congressmen, but it should be rejected by everyone. Sadly, though, our nation has lost sight of our Creator God, and so people are confused. And our cultural leaders, they know that homosexuality will inoculate children against the Bible. They know that if children grow up believing that homosexuality is good, that they'll think that Jesus must be bad, and the apostles must be bad, and Moses must be bad. And that's why, the Clintons, Bill Clinton, why has he for years promoted homosexuality? It's not because he likes to hang out with homosexuals. It's because they intuitively know that if they could get people to accept homosexuality as good, then those people will believe that God is bad. And that's why it's the major issue that it is.
Okay. Well, we were treated, if that's the word. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me back up here, Bob. We've got a lot of time here, and you've got we've got a pretty good audience and a pretty vast audience here listening to you. Why don't we do this? We've got so many issues to really get into and discuss. I'm going to give you free reign. We're going to give you free reign. Why don't you go ahead and take us? Start out with whatever you want to start out with. The issue with the abortion video that came out on Breitbart, the undercover video today, to top off the one that last week or the previous one. It is so revolting to see how people can just over salad, over drinks, over lunch talk about trafficking in human body parts. I mean, it's illegal, number one, and number two, it's satanic. But having said all of that, that's kind of watching that. It just, I mean, I kicked my file cabinet. I don't know. But having said all that, you go ahead and you are the expert. You take us. Well, why don't you take us on the journey that you want to get your message out there? Tell people what they need to hear.
Thank you, Doug. So why don't we get to the video in just a few minutes? I'd like to cross a few T's and dot a few I's of topics we brought up with the audience already, just so that they know that we're not just shooting off at the lip, that we truly attempt to honor God as we do our due diligence, our research, so that we can know as Christians, as men of God, as women of God who follow Christ, when we speak, people need to know that they could trust our words. They need to check them, but that we're generally trustworthy. I think you mentioned Sarah Palin. Well, it was only a few years ago that the body of Christ, our leaders, from Focus on the Family to National Right to Life, through even if you look at the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops, pro-life organizations across the country fell all over themselves to say that she was a pro-life hero. And so what we did, I'm on the board of American Right to Life, and American Right to Life sponsors prolifeprofiles.com. So all we did was we asked our research director, Darryl Berkey, to put together a profile of Sarah Palin's actual accomplishments or actual track record on abortion. So here's the first thing we found out about her. Sarah Palin, she appointed a Planned Parenthood board member to the Alaska Supreme Court. Now, this Planned Parenthood board member, her name is Morgan Kristen. And so what all the Fox News Channel, all their talking heads, Sean Hannity, and whether it's from Dennis Prager to Hugh Hewitt and on down, all they attempted to do was to defend every radical pro-abortion thing Sarah Palin did and misrepresented. So they said things like Sarah Palin had no choice. In Alaska, you only get to choose out of 3 candidates. Well, Sarah Palin is an adult, so she has a choice. And if there was someone who advocated killing Jews, and they said to me, Bob, you have to appoint this person to be a judge, I would say, well, of course I'm not going to appoint a racist to a position of authority. So I refuse. But not only did Sarah Palin appoint this Planned Parenthood board member to the Alaska Supreme Court, she also said this. She said, I have every confidence that Judge Kristen has the experience, the intellect, the wisdom, and character to be an outstanding Supreme Court justice. So that's just in our pro-life profile. If you click on Sarah Palin's sketch of her in profile, as we've had dozens of leaders sketched so that we can profile them on the site, that's one of a dozen examples of how Sarah Palin is actually pro-abortion. We have dumbed down what it means to be pro-life in America. If you don't kill your own child in America, you're considered a pro-life hero. If you will lie in a Republican primary and say that you're pro-life, you are considered a pro-life hero. And it's like our leaders. And Doug, I know this is not true of you. I know this is not true of Joe. I had lunch yesterday with one of your repeat guests, Greg Jackson, who wrote We Won't Get Fooled Again,
right.
Where the Christian right went wrong and how to make America right again with Steve Dace. I know that Greg Jackson does not want to be lied to. But so many of our leaders want to be lied to. And they've been told for years now that we only need one more judge. If we have one more justice on the Supreme Court, then we'll win. So we did the same thing. We went to our research director, who happens to be a man in Denver, the name of Darryl Berkey. We said, could you research the justices on the Supreme Court? Because we want to know, if we only need one more, we want to know which justices are pro-life. What we ended up doing is writing a check for $10,000 to National Right to Life. You could see the check online. I'm sure you could just Google American Right to Life, check to National Right to Life. And the whole check, we scanned it. It's right there with our account numbers, our routing numbers, and everything. The check number, 15,050. And we said, we will give this check to National Right to Life if they could name a single pro-life justice. Just name one. One Supreme Court justice who has ever written in a majority opinion, in a dissent, who's ever published an article, who's ever said publicly when they're giving a speech or being interviewed, if they can name one who's ever said that the unborn child has a right to life, we will give National Right to Life $10,000. That check is still sitting on my desk. That check is still uncashed because there is not one. And the truth is, when Roe v. Wade was an opinion issued by the court in 1973, an opinion that should have been rejected and ignored, it was written by a Republican justice, Harry Blackmun. And it was passed by a Republican court. The Supreme Court was a majority nominated by Republicans, and the decision, the 5-4 decision, was a majority Republican decision. So Roe v. Wade came to us from the Republican Party. By the time George W. Bush left office, we had 8 years of Ronald Reagan, 4 years of George H.W. Bush, and 8 years of George W. Bush. We filled the federal judiciary with pro-abortion judges. By the time George W. Bush stepped down, his last day in office, we pro-life Republican Christians we got 60% of the federal judiciary on the bench. 60%. In other words, we owned the federal government. I mean, the Democrats have not had what we have had. We have had the White House, when we had the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the Supreme Court. We had it all. And what we've ended up with is a Supreme Court that's pro-abortion, that rejects that the unborn child is a person, and we have a federal judiciary that is overwhelmingly pro-choice, pro-abortion, and that means the judges that we put in office, our own judges, who are radically pro-homosexual. They're aggressively against teaching children that God is our creator, and they're radically pro-abortion. So this is all going to happen again, Doug. We're in this cycle, and some of us who've taken the blinders off, you know, God says, for he who has ears to hear and he who has eyes to see, you'll be able to see. So you won't be lied to. You won't be gullible to be lied to by politicians and political fundraisers. And when there is a politician who's a Republican, and I'm a Republican, I'm often embarrassed to admit that I'm a Republican, and now and then I've re-registered with the Constitution Party or some other party occasionally to support some candidate. But I've been a Republican virtually my whole life. And when we have a candidate who's willing to kill a single innocent child, that candidate, my candidate, is worse than any other candidate if my candidate is willing to kill an innocent child. And I don't know
Absolutely.
Amen to that. Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you. We do have folks. We're working on some sound issues. We apologize if if the sound is in and out. We're working on that. Bob, didn't mean to overtalk you, but just saying amen to that.
If I could, I want to play a quick clip.
This is terminology, right? Healthcare and choice, and what they're talking about is dismembering little boys and girls, children made in God's image. If someone took an animal and as it was about to give birth, let's say it was a fetal pig or a kitten, and if they began to rip the limbs off of that animal, there would be outrage by every Democrat, every liberal, every atheist, and in fact, they would want to see you put in prison if you were to dismember an animal in its mother's womb, an animal. If a chick was being hatched and you took a scissors and cut off the head of that chick, they would call for you to be incarcerated.
Yeah,
but Planned Parenthood, yeah.
If you shot a pregnant lady in the stomach and only killed the baby, it's murder. Except even if the lady's on her way walking to the abortion clinic.
Exactly. And Bob, I think what we're seeing here, and the clip that was just played demonstrates this it's a fantastic demonstration of this marketing campaign, and the most successful one in modern history, where the debate is framed outside of the issue. It's not about rights. It's not about health. It's healthcare. They've actually redirected the argument to make it sound more palatable, like women's choice and such.
Right. Healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, this is a slick marketing campaign by demonic forces. I mean, by people who are morally and spiritually bankrupt or worse. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And you're exactly right. And it deceives those who want to be deceived. Jesus, he didn't spend most of his time talking about how evil Caesar was in Rome or how wicked Pontius Pilate was, the governor in Palestine. He spent his time talking about those who claimed to be religious leaders who were destroying the flock. You mentioned that if a baby in the womb is killed, most of the country recognizes that that's a homicide. Here in Colorado, we just convicted James Holmes for the Aurora Theater massacre. To this day, the media says that 12 people were killed. There were 12 homicides. Well, the truth is there were 13. And the 13th victim has been rejected by our law, our prosecutors, and our media here in Colorado because they say the youngest victim who was killed was a 9-year-old daughter of a pregnant mom, Ashley Moser, who was in the theater. Well, Ashley was pregnant, and a short time after those murders, Ashley's baby died. So that little Moser child was the 13th victim of the Aurora Theater massacre, the mass murderer, James Holmes. Here in Colorado, when a drunk driver kills a baby, in Longmont, Colorado, Heather Servick, we had the Brady Amendment. We did, every time we go back on the ballot with the Personhood Amendment in Colorado, we keep doing better. We got 27%, our first statewide ballot. We got 29% the next. And the last time with Brady, we got 34%. And we're not giving up, Doug, because these kids are our neighbors. And God said we're to love our neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. And if somebody was going to come and kill my child, I would ask God to give me every ability, bit of wisdom and courage and strength to know how to love and protect my child. And I'm called to do that by the Lord for my neighbor's child also.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And and I think that one of the issues, Bob, that we really need to start with, and even as academic as this sounds, we need to get, and I know I just came off of saying this, but I want to re-emphasize this. We need to get the language that we use straight. It's not pro-choice. It's not a fetus. It's not tissues. It's not a sample. As no, we're talking about a human being, a human life. And if people understood this, I mean, if we would just simply use the proper terminology, I think people might be rethinking, many people would be rethinking this. For example, and I just use gay marriage, for example. If we go back into the early 20th century, into the dictionaries, it would be, instead of gay marriage, or gay is referencing homosexualities, sodomy, sodomites. So
Of course.
So would we be flying the or would we be praising the sodomite ruling? Okay, or sodomite opinion, I should say. It's not even a ruling. So words, as Rush Limbaugh says, they mean things, and I think that we have to use the right terms all the time and be articulate and accurate. But having said that, going back to what you said, exactly, it's our duty to protect not only our children but the voices of the children that don't have, or the children that don't have a voice. We It's our job. And so go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I know that there's so many issues we want to talk about, but when you just mentioned homosexuality, I thought about one of our boys, Cheryl and I. We've raised 7 boys, and 3 are still at home being homeschooled. They're teenagers, and one was on a wonderful geology lab last week for a whole week up in the Rocky Mountains, whitewater rafting, learning about creation and that God is our creator and that we're not just overachieving worms. We're not just animals, that we're human beings made in his image and likeness. And it was interesting that even though this was all Christians on this event, of course, the issue of the Supreme Court opinion came up. And notice, we don't even call it a ruling. We call it a Supreme Court opinion, and it's an opinion that needs to be rejected. But my son mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible, and he's 15 years old. And one of the Christians, an older gal, she said, well, that's true, but the Bible doesn't say that it was sexual immorality that God was mad at. And so, and I know you guys immediately can recognize that that's not true. But I was so proud of my son who was able to say, well, in the epistle of Jude in the New Testament, Jude says in verse 7 that Sodom and Gomorrah had given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh. And that's why they're an example of God's vengeance and eternal fire. And this Christian gal, she was actually thankful. She had a soft heart toward the Lord, but she had heard from other Christian leaders that Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed because of sexual immorality. And that's so sad that that's the state of biblical knowledge in much of the church today. I don't believe it's the case of your listeners at all, but much of the church, they don't know, Doug. They don't know what God has said.
That's true, and it's interesting too. I find this very telling that when we do speak about the such things, the immorality, the sexual perversion, the biblical, as it states in the Bible. I mean, the Bible is pretty clear.
Genesis chapter 18.
But yeah, I mean, it just amazes me still that people want to characterize our positions or our beliefs as hate speech or as being hateful toward the or telling lies or not telling the truth, as evidenced by what you just said about the Christian woman talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible doesn't specifically state. Oh, yes, it does. And I think people hear things, and this is my view. People just hear things from other teachers, pastors, ministers, whatever, and accept it as the truth without researching the facts for themselves. That's why the Bible's so important.
Thank you for that, Doug. On Monday of last week, I was just interviewed as a representative for American Right to Life by Newsweek's senior political correspondent. She said she flew out to Denver from New York, Nina Burley, and she said they're doing a cover story for politics in America and in Colorado, and how passionate we are here in Colorado to save the unborn child. And I know that Newsweek will do everything it can to mock those who honor God and to mock those who try to protect a child from being dismembered. But I thought about that because we're talking about homosexuality and Sodom and Gomorrah. Joe mentioned Genesis chapter 18. Another Newsweek reporter came out here a while back, did a cover story on homosexual marriage, and it was titled this, Our Mutual Joy. It was a despicable article. And I interviewed on our website, kgov.com, on our radio show, the author, Newsweek reporter Lisa Miller. And Doug, Lisa lied about the scriptures in as clear a way as possible. She wrote this in her article. She wrote, "Nowhere in the Bible do its authors condemn sex between women, sexual behavior between women." Now, of course, anyone who knows anything about the Bible's teaching on sexuality knows that Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul explicitly condemns the vile passion of women with women, and men with men who leave the natural use of the woman and burn in their lust one for another, and women with women who do this same thing. So what Lisa Miller did was she quoted from Romans chapter 1, but she quoted just around that verse. She left out that verse, and I challenged her on why she did that. And it was obvious it was for this reason. She wanted to point out that the authors of the Bible were bigoted and that they would condemn male homosexuality, but not female homosexuality. So to make that case against God's word, to make God's word seem unreasonable, Newsweek would commit this gross journalistic faux pas of intentionally misrepresenting a book that is available to everyone in the country. And they get away with it because many of our Christian leaders are sort of embarrassed, to almost like they're ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They're sort of embarrassed to say that God condemns homosexuality between women, between men. God in the Old Testament and the New Testament condemns that behavior because he loves the individual. And if you love your neighbor, you're going to warn them against homosexuality because it will destroy them in their mind, their body, and their soul.
That's very true. Yes, and to the extent that you want to continue with this and get into the lies behind this, I mean, the fraudulent research. I mean, we could take this back to Kinsey and how he perverted statistics and perverted everything. You know, I mean, it's just people. Where we're at today is based on a history of lies, nothing but lies, and a even bigger lie behind the smaller lies. So you go ahead and continue. You just have you take us.
Yeah.
I mean, you
well, thank you. Yeah, and after being a talk show for these almost a quarter of a century, the topics you bring up, Doug, are so central to people understanding what's happening in our culture. Kinsey was one of the fathers of, they call it the sexual revolution. There was nothing revolutionary about it. It was the old perversion, the old bondage to lust. He had in his research, Kinsey talked about pedophilia. And there's a resurgence, a modern resurgence of liberals advocating to legalize sex with children.
That's right.
This was it was a huge movement in the 1970s. And we have at our website, kgov.com/homosexuality, we have a horrifically long list of leaders, popular people, magazines, publishers who've all advocated, defended, tolerated pedophiles and those who celebrate sex with children. So Kinsey, he wrote about adult-child sexual relations, and this is what he said was so bad about it. He said the thing that's bad about it is all the anger against it. He said we make too much to do about it. So to Kinsey, that was the problem with pedophiles. Just that people objected so strenuously. We have today the American Psychiatric Association. it's sort of horrific to know what's been happening. In 2013, there was a conference over in England. I'll mention that first. And it was a conference on pedophilia, and a leading sexuality researcher, Philip Tromovich. This is in Cambridge University, one of the most respected institutions of so-called higher learning in the world. And he argued that pedophilia is natural and normal for adult males, natural and normal. The American Psychiatric Association, they had a working group that expressed concern that their own standard for diagnosing someone as mentally unhealthy because of pedophilia, they said their own diagnostic criteria only apply to adults who have sexual relations with children 10 years old and younger. And so this working group of the APA proposed that they amend their criteria to make it clear that adults who desire sex with children ages 11, ages 12, ages 13, age 14, that those adults should be diagnosed as mentally unhealthy. And here's what happened. This was in 2012. The American Psychiatric Association rejected the proposal. This is why we point out, after years of research on this topic also, that when people break down the boundaries that God has set up, God said that he created us male and female. Well, that's a boundary that the godless want to break down. And so they want to say that Bruce Jenner is a woman. Well, if Bruce Jenner is a woman, then the head of the NAACP, she can be black, I guess, if she wants to be black. And anybody could be anything. It's as insane and absurd as could be, but it's because of sin. It's not that these people are stupid and stupidity leads to sin. It's that they're sinful, and sin leads to stupid. Sin leads to stupid. So if a white woman is genetically Caucasian and she says, I'm black, and then she's committed fraud and she's misled and she's taken a lot of money that was meant to go toward maybe folks who are underprivileged and given opportunities, and she took that money by fraud, and she took that influence in those positions by fraud, well, that's just who you are genetically as far as your ethnicity.
Right.
Who you are, whether you're a man or a woman, I mean, this is whether you have two X chromosomes or an X and a Y chromosome. So homosexuals say that you are born a homosexual, but they say you could choose your gender. Have you ever thought of the absurdity of that contradiction? That you're born a homosexual, you have no choice, but whether you're a man or a woman, you could choose that. I mean, it's ingrained as deeply as anything could be ingrained in our DNA, in the book that God wrote of who we are when we're unfolding in our mother's womb. From the moment of conception, you're either a little boy or you're a little girl. And our culture, because they hate God who created us, they say, no, you can decide, you can choose whether you're a boy or a girl, but if you're a homosexual, you were born that way. That's right. The insanity that we're fighting against, Doug.
It is, and I suspect by definition, insanity, because there's no rationality and no rational or sensible reasoning behind it. It's contradictory. And, you know, again, it's framing the debate using fraudulent information, statistics, and it's repetition of lies all of the time. And, you know, I feel bad. I truly feel bad for people who embrace the belief that, for example, homosexual, the opinion of the Supreme Court, you see these people celebrating on the steps of courthouses, and you've seen them do that. You know, I truly feel bad for those people. They are
Yes,
delusional.
yes.
They've been deluded. They've been sold a bill of goods, a lie. And the lie is so big and so deep that they can't see it. And even the proponents, um, they can't see it either. Um, but it's
Well,
sad. It really
do
is.
you
Go ahead.
remember, Doug? Do you remember? I remember homosexual leaders, activists saying, "We just want to be left alone. We
Right.
just want to be left alone." Well, what you just said, right? That's what we said on the air, right? In the public square, Christianity and homosexuality are mutually exclusive. One or the other will be in the closet. So when we point that out, that Christianity and homosexuality are mutually exclusive, one or the other will be in the closet. Well, this is how a homosexual will reply. They'll say, "No, really, we just want to be left alone." "Oh, yeah, you better bake us a cake. If you don't, we'll sue you. We'll close you down. We'll take your house. We'll take your business. And you better keep your mouth shut about it." Or, you know what else they'll say? In each of these examples, Doug and Joe, each of these are a lawsuit or legislation proposed by homosexuals or even passed. Or they'll say, "Oh, and we just want to be left alone, and you better bake us a pizza pie for our wedding, and cookies, and you've got to send us flowers, and you better give me a haircut while I'm waiting, and you got to take photos and video of our wedding. Oh, and forget your heterosexual student clubs because we're closing those down, and forget your dating services." Remember, eHarmony was started as a service for Christians, and they were threatened to be sued, and they knew they would have been shut down. So they've closed down our heterosexual dating services and student clubs. We decided to ban them. And oh yeah, and did we tell you you're going to print us some T-shirts, and then you're going to host our wedding? And these are all lawsuits. Yeah, even on your church property, where they have actually sued to hold their perversion, because they want what looks like the approval of God. That's what they want. But they will not get the approval of Christians who honor the Lord, and they will not get the approval of God, because God loves them enough to warn them to repent and to turn to him in humility and sorrow. And then they'll be forgiven, and they could have joy for the rest of eternity, loving God and enjoying him forever. But they've also said this, Doug. They've said, "We're going to sue you unless we want a parade. And we want you, Christian, we want you to provide security for us. Oh, and by the way," and this is real too, "you better retranslate your Bible." That was another lawsuit. "You better retranslate your Bible to remove any objection to homosexuality." And how's this? This is the last example I'll give. In Colorado, our government has passed a law, it's on the books, to censor our objectionable speech. Literally, this law is on the books now in Colorado. It is Colorado Revised Statutes 2434-301, and it's that the publishing of discriminatory matter is prohibited. It actually says forbidden. Publishing of discriminative matter forbidden. And this law says, 2434-701, says, "No person shall publish any communication of any kind intended to discriminate against sexual orientation in the matter of any accommodation, any right," like they consider marriage to be a right, "privilege," like adoption, advantage or convenience. So when I broadcast my radio show, Doug, in Colorado, they haven't taken action against us. but we are publishing a communication that violates the censorship statute 2434-701. We went to the ACLU. We said, we know that you guys despise us Christians, but this is literally a government censorship law. Would you help us? At the time, it was called Senate Bill 8200. We said, would you guys help us and fight against this bill because you support free speech? You know, the ACLU refused, and so Colorado has a censorship bill on the books right now that makes the teachings of Denver Bible Church against the law. And the broadcast of Bob Enyart Live, my radio show, is against the law. And that's the state of the battle that we're in right now, when they said for years, we just want to be left alone, but the truth is the exact opposite. They want to control your actions, your words, and even your thoughts. If you are, our dear friends are the Benham brothers. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Benham brothers, David and Jason Benham, and their father, Flip Benham, who led Operation Rescue National for years. HGTV signed them for a home improvement show, and they were running the promos for their series to begin on HGTV. It was going to be a huge hit, like the Property Brothers, only way better. And HGTV broke the contract and dropped the Benham brothers just days before the airing of the first episode because they realized that the Benham brothers thought that marriage should be between a man and a woman.
Huh. All right. Well, the direction that we're headed right now, I mean, okay, just to back up to what you said, the teachings from your church, the airing of the biblical, fundamentalist biblical teachings to be against the law here in America, people have got to be wondering, wait a minute, how did we get here? America being founded as a Judeo-Christian nation or Christian nation, going back to the Mayflower Compact, not necessarily the founding fathers themselves. I understand the difference, people. You don't have to send me emails. I get the difference. But okay, having said all that, how is it possible, Bob, that 1.5% to 3% of the population who identifies, it's not 10% or 15%. Those numbers are statistically engineered and false. Proven time and time again false, yet they're repeated. But how is it, Bob, that a minority of the population has the ability to control the vast majority of the population, and the vast majority of the population succumbs and subjects themselves to the will of this 3%? Why?
Well, Doug, I would think it's partly because our Christian leaders, the pulpits, have been virtually silent. Our pastors have been timid. They're afraid. If you recall, when the New Testament was being written, in the book of Hebrews, we learn that the early church, there were many who could not handle the meat of the word, and all they could handle was the milk. Well, today, our pastors are lactose intolerant. They're lactose intolerant. In other words, they can't even handle the milk. Today, our preachers cannot handle the milk. So there have been Christians, like, I know we are mentioning Greg Jackson. He's become one of my dearest friends. And he has been warning the church about our seeker-friendly churches for years now, because you have seeker-friendly churches where they've taken church, which is designed for the body of Christ. Churches where Christians who are busy in their lives, they get together at least once a week so we could be edified and grow up to be mature men and women in the body of Christ. They've taken church and they've retasked it to be a place for unbelievers. And so the messages have been so watered down that many of our pastors, they're the ones who can't handle the milk of the word. They can't even handle the milk. And so when the Supreme Court, when something referred to as the Supreme Court issued an opinion on something that they call homosexual marriage, we can extrapolate from what we've seen to know that millions of Christians who go to churches where they actually claim to believe in the Bible, millions of those Christians put the rainbow flag over their avatars on Facebook. Millions of them. Millions of Christians approved of this so-called Supreme Court saying that homosexuality had to be promoted across this nation. Millions of Christians no longer even know right from wrong when it comes to killing babies, when it comes to being a man or being a woman, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to the perversion of sexual immorality, when it comes to the perversion of pornography, where millions of Christians brag about the TV shows and the movies they watch which have outright pornography, and they brag about it. Pastors will use an illustration for their sermon, and they'll talk about some show on HBO or Showtime, which our family, we knew back in the 80s that if you have HBO or Showtime, you're addicted to pornography. If you have that in your home. We have pastors who will brag about their favorite shows on these so-called premium channels that flaunt nudity. God clothed Adam and Eve, and Satan has been trying to unclothe human beings in public ever since. So our pastors no longer know right from wrong. And that's why millions of Christians don't know. And so the main answer, I think, to your question, Doug, how does 3% or less get us to this point? It's because the church has gone AWOL. The church has become effeminate. Our Christian leaders are no longer men. They're like women and children, our leaders, who should be men. They've been feminized. And then also, there's a second reason. And that's because the public, we all have this ability to sense wickedness. It's like we have antenna. And our antenna knows right from wrong. So when there's a movement, like let's say the personhood movement, trying to stand up for the human rights of these unborn children, boys and girls, well, our leaders in our universities, in the media, they know, because God wrote his law on their hearts, they know that it's wrong to kill a child. But they want to express their rebellion against God. So they oppose the personhood of the unborn child. So they beat down the personhood movement. Whereas there's the homosexual rights movement, so it's called, and our cultural leaders, they know, intuitively they know, that if they can get people to approve of homosexuality, those people will therefore disapprove of God's word. Homosexuality, it inoculates children against the gospel. So it's like a vaccine against the gospel. And so the culture knows that if they affirm homosexuality, it's not that many of our, let's say, our movie stars. It's not that most of them go to gay bars, that they like to hang out in homosexual bars, that they like to hang out with homosexuals. It's not that at all. It's just that they know that they don't want to submit to God Almighty. And they want others to join them in their rebellion against God. The way Lucifer wanted Eve to join him, and the way Eve wanted Adam to join her in rebellion, they want children, they want families to join in their rebellion against God, and so they aggressively support homosexuality. They're building a society that is absolutely intolerant of any disagreement on this utter perversion that is called homosexuality. Now, I think those are the two reasons, Doug, why 3% have controlled, like the tail wagging the dog, why 3% have controlled the nation.
Thank you for that very, I mean, that answer is right on the money. We see the homosexual activists. They've said really, and you can, folks, you can research this, but how many, most all have said that really now I'm talking about the activists, the people behind the agenda. They've said that the only thing standing between them and full acceptance of the homosexual agenda are the Christians. Specifically Christian activists who believe in the Christian gospel and who hold to biblical standards of right and wrong. So we as Christians have become now the targets of this agenda, and built within this framework of this agenda is a massive public relations campaign, and it's very effective and heavily monetized. Folks, we're talking with Mr. Bob Enyart. Bob's website, kgov.com. That's kgov.com, kgov.com. Bob Enyart is our guest. His other website as well, if you go to prolifeprofiles.com, that's prolifeprofiles.com. Both of those websites linked off of Hagmann and Hagmann.com. Bob, we're up against the top of the hour break. Please hang with us. It's up.
Ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 on this Tuesday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Our guest tonight is Bob Enyart.
Enyart.
I mispronounced that. I apologize, Bob.
No problem.
A quick couple of programming notes. One, folks, we have a revamped YouTube channel thanks to JD. If you go to YouTube and search Team K9, that's the easiest way to find it. Or you go to HagmannandHagmann.com, click the YouTube. It's not called Team K9. It's the official Hagmann and Hagmann Report. But that's the easiest way to find it. Don't fall
for the imposter channels.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to find it. You'll see our image, and check that out, because JD has done some awesome work editing. It's put new intros in the beginning of the shows. Just fantastic stuff. Put information in the videos. Relevant to what is being talked about on the show. So definitely check out the new YouTube channel.
He's a tireless worker, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Also, Thursday, or the 27th, I believe.
No, it's the 23rd, I believe. Oh, well, wait a second. Well, let's get this right here. Okay.
Hold on. Hey, Joni, can you tell me, is Paul's meeting on the 27th of this?
No.
Paul McGuire has a prayer and intercessor meeting coming up this month in Southern California. He's been on. We've promoted it several times, and I believe it's either Thursday the 23rd. You could be right there.
Yeah, it's this coming Thursday. We apologize. Actually,
no, it's Thursday 7/23.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, we apologize, Paul and the listeners out there. We actually have the copy from last month, but this coming Thursday, July 23rd, 7 o'clock, Paul McGuire will be holding a free America's Future Prophecy and Intercessory Prayer meeting at the Garland Hotel. Now, that's formerly the Beverly Garland Hotel, North Hollywood, California. Parking is free. You got to register. Folks, if you haven't right now and you intend to go, please do it. And also, pack the car with your family, your friends. You grab some people off the street. Just toss them in the car. It doesn't matter. In fact, no, I'm not going to say. You just make sure you go. It's going to be a fantastic and this is a Holy Spirit-filled event. That's Paul McGuire's America's Future Prophecy and Intercessory Prayer meeting this Thursday, July 23rd, 7 o'clock p.m. local time.
The Garland Hotel. Yep. Free parking outside the hotel. Register at paulmcguire.us. And then tomorrow, Pastor Langford, Steve Quill will be our guest tomorrow evening.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll just say this: the topic, rape, pillage, and plunder. America has gone under. Do you even care? How will you and your family fare? Guess who wrote that up? wasn't me. But anyway, we're going to be talking about a lot of
Steve
different
has
things.
some creative titles.
He does. I
He's
don't
like
know.
me. He tries to fit a lot into the,
I keep saying Steve. Wait, look, only so many letters, Steve.
Yeah, I have the same problem.
Anyway, and don't forget, Steve's going to be on Coast to Coast AM tonight. Um, even drop him an email. Just tell him you love him and Pat Langford. If you do, I mean,
That's
of course
one of
I
the
do.
few people I will listen to Coast for. Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, our special guest tonight, and we're so thankful to have him. I do want to say hello to every member of the Denver Bible Church. Hello, everyone who is linked live or by archive. And our guest tonight is Bob Enyart.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bob. I didn't know you were a pastor.
Yeah, he's the pastor then.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, what an honor. Our church was planted by a Bible church across town in January of 2000. And we just a few months ago purchased for the first time our own church home. And it's in a wonderful location in the Denver metro area. And our goal is to share the gospel of the Lord with everyone in our city and with our state and with the world.
Wow. God is working, I believe, through us as vessels in really miraculous ways if we open ourselves up to Him and are obedient. And I heard a sound clip, and I don't even want to get off. I shouldn't even get off on this, but this Mike Malloy character on the radio, I can't even believe that he's got a
I
he's
check
got
his
airtime.
videos out once in a while to see the anti-Christian rhetoric, and he was talking about the shooting in the church and mocking a woman who was on the news saying that she didn't feel scared because she felt the Lord was protecting her, and he it was.
I mean, you know what, Bob and Joe. I don't know. This Mike Malloy is
He's just an angry, hateful.
Yeah, but it's okay for people to come on and say, this is your God that's responsible basically for this massacre. It's okay. But
yeah, he said your God pulled the trigger, but he protected you because you're so special, and he was just mocking the religion, mocking her faith, mocking her belief.
But when Bob Enyart goes on the radio, in Denver, it's against the law. He's violating the law, ostensibly, for talking about things in the Bible. Bob, welcome back. Go ahead, take us anywhere you want to go.
Well, thank you so much, Doug and Joe. So I know that the big news today is the second Planned Parenthood undercover video from the Center for Medical Progress, which, and if people have been following this battle for some years, my family, we've been in the battle since the 1980s. We've been with Operation Rescue here in Colorado. And so we're very familiar with a young gal from California, Lila Rose, and her live action outreach. And she went undercover to scores of Planned Parenthood abortion mills all throughout the land and exposed them as the baby killers they are and many other laws that they're breaking. Well, now the Center for Medical Progress has taken that effort to a new high. They have leading Planned Parenthood officials. I mean, last week it was that abortionist Nuka-Tola. Today it's Dr. Mary Gator. She is the president of Planned Parenthood's Medical Directors Council. Mary Gator is herself an abortionist. She talks in this video, it's about an 8-minute video, undercover. They're at a restaurant just like the one that was published a week ago. Only this one, the video is even better and the audio is much better. So you could even make it out on radio. And they have this leading Planned Parenthood Federation of America official. They have her talking about she's haggling over how much that buyers are willing to pay her for each organ that they could harvest from a baby's body that she kills. and she said they
Bob,
killed about
upload the
800.
clip.
Oh, do you think we could hear it? Because it begins with
Yes.
Cecile, the president of Planned Parenthood, responding to last week's undercover video, and then they get into this week's.
Yeah, we can play it. I don't know how good the quality is going to be because when the video from YouTube was a little muffled, it sounded like. But let's try and play it.
And folks, we're going to depend on you in the chat.
Tell us if it's too loud.
Yes, or too quiet, whatever. Just give us a sound quality check. Go ahead.
All right, here we go.
Hello, I'm Cecile Richards, President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. I want to be really clear. The allegation that Planned Parenthood profits in any way from tissue donation is not true.
Now they're telling us this is an undercover video shot in February.
What would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Now we're finding out that the undercover reporters posed as fetal tissue procurement agents.
We'll be exhibiting at the Medical Directors Council
good.
meeting
Good.
in a couple of weeks, so I don't know if you'll be attending.
I'm now the president of that organization.
Oh.
So Dr. Gator was medical director at Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. She's now the president of their medical
So we had
directors
just started the
council.
conversation, and Susan was explaining they're a startup, that they have been about a year in business. They're a for-profit company that's connecting researchers with people willing to donate tissue. Our volume, thank you for giving it to me, is 800 a year with 60 in the second trimester, and we just started talking about how the process worked with Novogenics down in Los Angeles when I was there.
Okay.
To back up a little bit, PPFA, our parent body, is on board with tissue donation, but we have to ask for a waiver to do it, and we have to lay out for them what the program's going to be like. And the mechanics of it was that Heather, Novogenics person, would come to the site, our staff would sign patients up and get consent, and then Heather would look at the tissue and take what she required. So it was logistically very easy for us. We never do anything. So there's compensation for this. We never do anything. So there's compensation for this, and there was a discussion as I was leaving. They have been paying by the case, and there was some discussion about doing it in a different way, or I don't know what we're used to doing, how we're used to doing compensation. Patients don't get anything, of course.
Okay, so I'd like, what would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Okay. I don't think so. I would like to know what would make you happy. What would work for you?
Well, you know, in negotiations, the person who throws out the figure first is at a loss, right? So.
No, I don't look at it that way. I know you want to play that game. I get it, but no, I want
low ball because I'm used to low things from.
You know what? If you low ball, I'll act pleasantly surprised, and you'll know it's a low ball.
Okay.
What I want to know is what would work for you. Don't low ball it.
Okay.
Tell me what you really.
$75 a specimen.
Oh, that's way too low. And that's way too low. I want to keep you happy.
I've been at places that did 50 too. But see, we're not in it for the money. Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Okay, no, I want
low ball,
you
$75 a specimen, and we don't want to be in a position of being accused of selling tissue and stuff like that. On the other hand, there are costs associated with the use of our space and all that kind of stuff. So what are you thinking about?
Right. So way higher than that. So I'd like to start at around 100.
Okay. Now this is for tissue that you actually take, not just the tissue that person volunteered that you can't find anything. Right?
Exactly.
Now this is for tissue that you actually take, not just the tissue that person volunteered that you can't find anything. Right?
Exactly. Right. What we can use, what is intact. So that's why I'm saying no, don't lowball. I want you to be
well,
happy.
It's complicated by the fact that our volume is so low too. I mean, are you looking at 8 and 9 week specimens or only second trimester specimens?
10 to 12 week, end of the first trimester. If those are pretty intact specimens, then that's something we can work with.
So that's an interesting concept. Let me explain to you a little bit of a problem, which may not be a big problem. If our usual technique is suction at 10 to 12 weeks, and we switch to using an iPass or something with less suction or to increase the odds that will come out as an intact specimen, then we're kind of violating the protocol that says to the patient, we're not doing anything different in our care of you. And to me, that's a kind of a specious little argument, and I would object to asking Ian, who's our surgeon that does the cases, to use an iPass at that gestational age in order to increase the odds that he was going to get an intact specimen. But I do need to throw it out there as a concern, because the patient is signing something, and we're signing something saying we're not changing anything in the way we manage it just because we need to give tissue. Heard of that before.
All right. Yeah. No. It's
all right. We can stop this now, Bob, and go ahead and comment on this. It gets a little dicey with respect to the audio, but I think the listeners get the idea. Bob, go ahead and comment on this.
Thank you, Doug. So we have Planned Parenthood this past week saying that we do not sell fetal tissue because, as this video showed at the beginning, it's a clear violation of federal law to sell fetal tissue. And so this woman, this Dr. Mary Gator, and I hate to call her a doctor, she's an abortionist. Rather than Dr. Mary Gator, I'd rather call her the Mad Gator, I guess. She is negotiating a price, and they ended up at $100 per organ. And as the video goes on, they talk about, well, if they're organs that are combined, and let's say they're not as significant organs to the researchers, and they're attached, well, maybe they'd be $75 for two that are attached, so maybe a gland and an organ together, and she'd get $150. She ends up saying that, and she's joking, but she says, I'd like a Lamborghini, so yeah, we should do this. And she says that when I do these abortions, I'll make sure to not use such a crunchy method, she says. So, I mean, they are talking about selling baby body parts. They've been doing this in Denver for years. The Mayfair Women's Center in Aurora, Colorado, and even Planned Parenthood in Denver. And we've been going to these abortion mills every day that they're killing children since the late 80s. We've been going. Our group of pro-life Christians here in the Denver metro area. We call the women who go in to get the body parts, we call them the harvesters. I think they call themselves the harvesters. They go through the babies' bodies that were killed that day, and they determine which of the organs are intact and that they're willing to pay for. And Planned Parenthood generated millions from selling babies' body parts.
And not to sound gruesome, but in the rest of that video, they go on to talk about the method of abortion and how the sucking of the infant, not to be crude, out of the womb is harmful to those organs and those parts that they want.
They prefer a manual suction as opposed to the Dyson vacuum cleaner. Okay.
Right, exactly, because they want the baby intact. And hey guys, maybe we could say something on your show that was misreported on Fox News last week, misreported by Life News, but we'll clarify it here. Last week, this abortionist Nucatella, Fox News said that she was claiming that she was doing a partial birth abortion, and that's actually not true. That's an exaggeration. She was claiming that she would do a breech, a feet-first delivery, to pull the baby out intact. And so a lot of pro-lifers assume that that meant an illegal partial birth abortion. Well, sadly, we also researched the partial birth abortion legislation and the ruling that was issued a few years back. And it was a horrifically wicked Supreme Court ruling. Pro-lifers were celebrating it. We read the ruling. You guys might know about Judge Roy Moore, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the State of Alabama, Ten Commandments judge. He's one of our heroes. He came out and celebrated the Supreme Court partial birth abortion ruling. So we called him. We first took out a full-page ad in the Birmingham News with a full-page letter to him and to Dr. Dobson. And we begged them to read the ruling because the ruling was violently wicked. And what the ruling said was, you can do a partial birth abortion as long as you first kill the baby. So the Supreme Court justices actually wrote, Anthony Kennedy actually wrote, if you inject a poison into the baby's cardio sac and kill the baby, then you could go ahead and deliver him breech feet first. They also, that ruling was a late-term abortion manual. They literally described the different ways you could kill that same baby. They said, if you want, you could use forceps and dismember the baby. And they literally said in their ruling, Doug, they said you could rip off the baby's legs and that will be legal. You could rip off his arms. But what you couldn't do is do a partial birth abortion where the baby was still alive and his head was the last thing to come out of the mother, and then they stabbed the baby in the back of the head to kill it. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that unless, and they actually found an exception. They said if the mother's overdilated and the abortionist realizes she's overdilated, then it's okay to do a standard textbook partial birth abortion. Well, that ruling was so evil that when Judge Roy Moore saw our full-page ad, and maybe I'll tell the audience how much it cost to run that ad. It cost us $8,000 to put one full-page open letter to Judge Roy Moore in the Birmingham News, because we thought it was so vital that Christian leaders would know the truth. So he read the ruling. He contacted us. He came on our radio show here in Denver. We have it archived, the audio. We have the transcript online. We have the highlights. He apologized to the public. He apologized to Christians, to pro-lifers, and to the unborn. He said, when I read that ruling, I realized it was the most violent, wicked ruling in the history of the U.S. Supreme Court. And this was the ruling that Dr. Dobson and Focus on the Family and National Right to Life and George Bush, it was the ruling they were celebrating. And it was a violently wicked ruling that explained how to kill late-term babies in America.
Essentially,
so,
Bob, you're just to be clear, you're talking about a complete birth.
Infanticide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. They take the baby and deliver the baby feet first. So that's called breech. And even the reason we call it breech is because of God's word, the Bible. In the book of Genesis, Tamar was pregnant with twins, and the one twin began to be delivered, and his hand came out, and the midwife put a scarlet thread around his hand. And the hand went back in, and his brother came out. So it's like the younger came out before the older, which is very similar with what Jacob tried to do to Esau. And the midwife said, this breach be upon you. And because of that, today, when a baby is born backward, feet first, it's much more dangerous for the mother and the baby. We call it breech. Well, the abortionists, they don't care if they break off the baby's leg. They literally don't care if they break the baby's leg because they're going to kill the baby anyway. And they really don't care if it's a bit more dangerous for the mother. And so they did these partial birth abortions, and we ran that full-page ad in every newspaper where there was a national ministry headquartered where that newspaper. We did it in the Washington Times. We ran it full-page in Colorado Springs for Dr. Dobson in the Colorado Springs Gazette. Each of these ads cost many thousands of dollars. We ran it in Mississippi for Don Wildman of the American Family Association, who we got the best response from AFA, Don Wildman, who's a godly man, and from Judge Roy Moore, who's a godly man. We got the best results from them. But here's what James Dobson did after our ad ran. He wrote in his national newsletter, he wrote this: ending partial birth abortion did not save a single innocent life, not one. And that was the tragic reality that we wasted 15 years on a diversion fundraiser. It brought in $250 million for the pro-life industry. And from the beginning, it did not have the legal authority to stop a single abortion, not one, because the abortionists just kill the babies in some other way. And so we squandered the blood of the children who were killed during all those 15 years by making pro-life organizations wealthier and electing even pro-choice Republicans who said that they supported the PBA ban, even like Donald Trump, for example. It provided political cover to politicians who were child killers. Could we maybe talk about Donald Trump for a moment, because
Sure.
he's in the news?
Yeah.
Well,
Why not?
you know, they say that the conservative Christians who know a little bit, they say Donald Trump is a rhino, Republican in name only. And there might have been a time when that was a valid label, but today it's the conservative Christian who's the rhino, because we're the ones who are Republican in name only, because the Republican Party today is socialist, and it's godless, and it's pro-abortion, and it's pro-homosexuality, and it's pro-teaching kids that they've evolved from animals. That's the Republican Party today. We should admit it. It's the party of tax and spend, big government. It's the party of George W. Bush and John McCain and Bob Dole and Mitt Romney. That's the Republic. So we're the ones who are rhinos, really. But if you want to call Donald Trump a rhino, okay, that's fine. Just on the issue of abortion. And again, at prolifeprofiles.com, American Right to Life went to our research director, Darryl Berkey. And it doesn't take a lot of work. We wonder, why can't Sean Hannity do this? Why can't Bill O'Reilly do this? Why can't Michael Medved or Hugh Hewitt or Dennis Prager do this? Why is it only the outreaches like Hagmann and Hagmann? Why is it only American Right to Life? Why isn't it only groups like Operation Save America, Flip Benham's group? Here's what Donald Trump wrote in his book. He authored a book in the year 2000, and he wrote this. He wrote, I support, and this is 2000, 15 years ago, so people change, right?
Right.
He wrote, I support a woman's right to choose, but I am uncomfortable with some of the procedures. When Tim Russert asked me on Meet the Press if I would ban partial birth abortion, my pro-choice instincts led me to say no. After the show, and politicians want to play both sides, right? So he said, after the show, I consulted 2 doctors that I respect, and upon learning more about this procedure, I have concluded that I would support a ban. So that sort of sounds good, okay? So he would support a ban. He's still pro-choice. He still supports a woman's right to choose, but he needs Republican pro-lifers because of his political ambition to be a possible nominee. So he says he'd support the partial birth abortion ban. Well, big deal. He's still a child killer, and he knows the abortionist would just kill the baby through a different procedure. That's what he said. He's uncomfortable with that procedure. It's what Chief Justice Roy Moore said after he read the ruling. He said the ruling gives them so many other ways to kill the baby. It's what Dr. Alan Key said in our documentary called Focus on the Strategy. He said this partial birth abortion ban, the law and the ruling are exceedingly wicked. And so then Donald Trump in 2009, so we fast forward 9 years, he was considering a presidential run, not as a Democrat, but as a Republican. So he said this: I believe it is a personal decision that should be left to the women and their doctors. That was 2009. So 2011, here's what he said, and we document all this at prolifeprofiles.com. And by the way, on every profile, it shows a $100 bill. And it says, find an error, win this. So how many websites, Joe, do you know of where the website offers to the general public, you win $100 if you could document an error?
Very few. And the ones that I do know of offer very high rewards for proving something that is unprovable.
Yeah. Good point. And you know, if somebody finds an error on Pro-Life Profiles, we're so thankful. We want to give them $100 because we do research as though we are worshiping the Lord. We do research as though God will hold us accountable for every word and every thought. Even Jesus said, even every idle word and every idle action. So Donald Trump in 2011 said, and see if you could catch the lie here. He said, as you know, I'm pro-life. Well, who could possibly know he's pro-life, right? Because he's been bragging that he's pro-abortion for his whole political career. So who could know in 2011, as you know, I'm pro-life? So that's a lie. His next words, he says, I'm forming an opinion. I thought you just said you're pro-life. You're forming an opinion?
A politician. They change their opinions like they change ties. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, he said, I'm pro-life. As you know, I'm pro-life. I didn't know that. I thought he was a child killer. As you know, I'm pro-life. I'm forming an opinion. I'm forming a very strong opinion, but I'll let you know in about 3 or 4 weeks, right? Because, hey, he's a politician. It depends on who he's talking to. And you know, sadly, that's what we get from the Republican Party. Mitt Romney spent years saying he was pro-abortion, and he funded Planned Parenthood, and he did far worse than Barack Obama has done in 7 years. Mitt Romney, as the governor of Massachusetts, did worse than Barack Obama has done. So then Donald Trump, he said this. He said, I'm forming an opinion. I'll let you know in a few weeks. Then he said, I'm pro-life, but I changed my view a number of years ago. He said this to the Christian Broadcasting Network, to David Brody. That was in April of 2011. But Kathleen Gilbert pointed out that Donald Trump has been donating aggressively to pro-abortion candidates. That included Hillary Clinton in 2007. He donated to the most pro-abortion Republican presidential contender in 2008. That was Rudy Giuliani, hardcore child killer. In 2010, he gave a lot of money to somebody in a local election. And this was Barack Obama's former chief of staff, Chicago's Rahm Emanuel. He gave Emanuel $50,000 to boost the political career of a 100% pro-abortion rated politician. So Donald Trump will lie. Since he advocates killing children, it's no surprise that Donald Trump will lie to get your support as a Christian to give him political power. And so that's the kind of information we should be getting from Sean Hannity, who names the name of Christ but betrays the Lord on every broadcast. That's the kind of information we should be getting from Bill O'Reilly. But Bill O'Reilly won't even name the name of Christ. Bill O'Reilly, when he's talking about God, he refers to him as the deity. And he makes it clear that he himself is not a Christian. So we have to be very careful, the people who we think are leaders, the people who we think are going to help us save the nation. When if there is a Christian who honors God and will not kill the innocent, our talking head conservatives will attack that person as unelectable. And they will do everything they can to get a Christian to support a politician who will kill a child. And it's no different from when in ancient Israel they sacrificed children to Molech. When we think about Jeb Bush, you know, we look at Jeb Bush's record, and he has all these exceptions. And at Pro-Life Profiles, you read the Jeb Bush profile, and it will make you sick to your stomach. Excuse me. Excuse me, Doug.
No, that's all right. You mentioned Jeb Bush. I was gagging myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, thank you.
I was
Thank
getting
you
my
for that
flag out.
segue. Yeah, they've built an exceptions calculator at Pro-Life Profiles. And you take a politician, you put in his name, his title, his jurisdiction, the beginning and end of his term, and the exceptions calculator will report back how many surgical abortions during those years in that jurisdiction, if it's a state or a federal office, how many chemical abortions with Plan B, the morning after pill, how many RU46, how many mechanical abortions like the IUD and all that prevents implantation, how many embryos destroyed by research, and so on. And then you check off the policies of that politician. And it turns out that Jeb Bush, not by Roe v. Wade, but by his own policies, advocated killing tens of thousands of children in Florida while he was the governor. Tens of thousands. And so we wonder about this. Does God look at the exceptions? Because what National Right to Life will say, what Focus on the Family will say, what James Dobson will say, tragically, and we love James Dobson, but he's bought into the lie that Republican child killers should be supported. What they will say is, well, these are just exceptions. But to God, God looks at the exceptions. Did God look at all the fruit that Eve did not eat on the tree? Did he say, well, you know, there's a whole tree of fruit here, and Eve, she only ate one of them? No, God doesn't care about all the fruit Eve did not eat. God did not mention all the women that David did not violate. God doesn't list all the children whom Herod did not kill. God looks at the exceptions. And if you love George W. Bush, you would pray for his soul and warn him, if you could, that by his own policies and approval, he has killed hundreds of thousands of children. And he will stand on Judgment Day before the Lord when the earth gives up the blood of the slain, and these children will speak against George W. Bush, the children who were murdered in their mother's womb. So if we care, if we have lust for political power, and we care only about defeating Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, then we'll lie about George W. Bush. We'll say he was a pro-life president, and we will help him to sleep well at night. But we do that because we hate him. If we love him, we will warn him that he needs to repent of the children that he slaughtered, of the pro-abortion judges that he packed the courts with in Texas and with our federal judiciary.
Amen. I mean, just as we would warn someone nearing the edge of a cliff into a bottomless pit or an abyss, we certainly would warn and should warn George W. Bush and every person like Bush about the error of their ways, because that's our duty as Christians, and we have to do that. And I just find all of this interesting, Bob. The the use of terminology, the again, I go back to the verbiage that we're talking about, but the clip. I'd like to go back to the talking about the video clip. Here's what I want to know: the undercover video. I want to know who's got the guts, and I'm choosing my words carefully here. Who will have the guts to hold these evil people responsible for the mass slaughter of babies? Will these people be, as far as I'm concerned, if I was the Attorney General of the United States, and there are many people out there saying, oh goodness, I'm glad he's not.
Oh no, I wish you weren't. I wish you were.
Let me tell you something, okay? I would have, I mean, the YouTube would not even be done playing when I would dispatch the people to put these monsters in handcuffs, drag them before the court, perp walk them in front of every American, and say, trafficking in body parts, not a good idea. Among other things, but I want to know, Bob, is there any action going to be taken, or are we just peeing into the wind?
Yeah, well, because we're in a primary season, we've been watching this cycle for decades, and here's what happens. Pro-life, conservative Republicans, in the primary, they're conservative. In the general election, they're moderates, and they govern like liberals. So in the primary, they're conservatives. In the general election, they're moderates. And when elected, they govern as liberals. It happens every time. George W. Bush, he was supposed to be against funding Planned Parenthood, right? Isn't everybody against funding Planned Parenthood? I mean, all these Republicans. And we give Planned Parenthood more money than the Democrats give them, we Republicans. Bill Clinton gave to Planned Parenthood as much money as he could possibly give them through his 2 terms. George W. Bush topped Bill Clinton, gave Planned Parenthood hundreds of millions of dollars more than Bill Clinton was able to give them. George W. Bush filled Planned Parenthood's coffers with money, hundreds of millions more than the Clintons were able to give them. And this is a pattern. Scott Walker in Wisconsin, he campaigns, he says he's against funding Planned Parenthood. They play with the numbers. He's given Planned Parenthood tens of millions of dollars just in the past few years, just in his state. So we're lied to. So Doug, it might be because there's, the Republican field, we call them 19 kids and counting right now. Just like the Democrats years ago, they were the Jacksonless Five when Jackson dropped out of the race. Well, we have 19 kids and counting. And if some of them think it's going to help them with their pro-life base to get money and votes, then they'll run with this as far as they see it as a political advantage. But when they get in office, they will fund Planned Parenthood. They will support child killing. Every time the pro-lifers introduce a bill, they call it a pro-life bill. Every time it says in the bill, it defends Planned Parenthood's core business. Every time it says that it in no way threatens a woman's right to kill her baby, or words to that effect. Basically, the laws that end with "and then you could kill the baby" are bad laws. And those are the only kinds of laws that National Right to Life, or I hate to keep saying it, but Focus on the Family, those are the only kinds of laws that they're willing to support. Laws that end with "and then you could kill the baby." So if you wait 24 hours, then you could kill the baby. Or if you don't dismember the child, then you could kill the baby. Or if you get him before he's 20 weeks old, then you could kill the baby, and so on. Or if you notify the parents, then you could kill the baby. Or you get parental consent, then you could kill the baby. So that's all they've been doing now for 30 years. And that's why we lost the entire federal judiciary, which is thoroughly pro-choice. And I mean the Republican judges are all pro-choice, all of them. There is not one that we've been able to identify, not one federal Republican judge, and we have nominated and put on the bench scores of judges. There's not one who acknowledges that the baby has a right to life, not one. And I lay that at the feet of Dr. James Dobson and National Right to Life. I lay it at their feet because we looked to them as leaders for decades. And we loved them and we trusted them, and they let us down. And they told us to support child killers like Bob Dole and John McCain and Mitt Romney. These are blatant child killers.
And Bob, if we can, I have one more sound clip. This is only a minute. It's on Obama. On the if his child made the mistake of getting pregnant. This is a minute quote. Here we go.
I've got two daughters, 9 years old and 6 years old. I'm going to teach them, first of all, about values and morals. But if they make a mistake, I don't want them punished with a baby. I don't want them punished with an STD at the age of 16.
What would you do at the federal level, not only to ensure access to abortion, but to make sure that the judicial nominees that you will inevitably be able to pick are true to the core tenets of Roe v. Wade?
Well, the first thing I'd do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. That's the first thing that I'd do. And that essentially adding an additional doctor who then has to be called in an emergency situation to come in and make these assessments is really designed simply to burden the original decision of the woman and the physician to induce labor and perform an abortion. Thanks to all of you at Planned Parenthood for all the work that you are doing.
All right. He wouldn't want his kids to be burdened with the mistake of a child.
Yeah, he just called a child a punishment.
And compared it to an STD.
You should look in the mirror.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Sorry.
Jesus Christ. No, thank you, Doug. Jesus Christ had a special love for children, a special love for them because of how precious they are and how innocent they are. And when the Bible refers to the baby in the womb, I know you guys know this, but let me share it with the audience. The Bible refers to the baby in the womb as a person with personal pronouns, with child, with children. For example, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son. So there, the fetus in the womb is called a child. In the first book in the Bible, the book of Genesis, chapter 25, Rebekah, Isaac's wife, conceived, and the children, that's Jacob and Esau, the most famous twins in history. Rebekah, his wife, conceived, and the children struggled together within her. So Moses wrote the book of Genesis as inspired by the Holy Spirit, and Moses used the term child, children struggled within her. In Judges with Samson, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. That's Samson. That would be Samson. Now drink no wine for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb. So even when Samson was in his mother's womb, he's called a child, and God views this child as special unto the Lord. And then maybe I'll just share 2 more verses. In Luke chapter 1, we read that he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. That's speaking of the Baptist, John the Baptist, using a personal pronoun. He will be filled, because at the moment of conception, you have a single cell, and our eyesight is pretty good. God gave us the ability to have 20/20 eyesight. But God's eyesight is much better. God could literally see the baby in the womb when it's a single cell. We need a microscope, but God sees whether it's a little boy or a little girl. Like we look at an ultrasound, and if we have trained eyes and the baby's a few months old, we could see, oh, look, it's a little boy or it's a little girl. At the single cell, God knows that baby when he's a single cell, and he sees an X and a Y chromosome, and he sees it's a little boy, or he sees a little girl.
Jeremiah 1:5, before
Right.
I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee as a prophet unto the nation. One example.
Amen.
And another example, in on the other side, talking about what we see today, Isaiah 13:18, their bows shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. One of many verses that speak of dashing the
Wow.
children from the womb.
Joe, thank you for that. And that Luke passage in the gospel, according to Luke in chapter 1, it says, and the babe, and that babe referred to, that's little Johnny, it's John the Baptist. And the babe leaped in her womb. So the babe leaped in Elizabeth's womb, and he leaped in her womb for joy. Because when Mary entered the house, and Mary was carrying Jesus within her womb, and little Johnny, John the Baptist, he was able to sense the presence of the Lord. So when a child comes into existence, there's an explosion of life, and he has body, soul, and spirit at that moment, and that child is alive to God. And when George W. Bush says, I'm going to give money to Planned Parenthood to kill that child because I think his father was a criminal, so it's okay to kill him, or all the other circumstances Bush says it's okay to kill that child is alive to God, and then that child is cut off from the land of the living, and that child then will be very aware that his mother or his father did not want him. And that is pain. That is suffering.
Wow.
In one verse to sum this up, in the end of Isaiah, it says, can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee.
Wow.
Okay.
Joe, thank you for that. And the many other verses on the child in the womb at American Right to Life's website. Now, they're the sponsors of Pro-Life Profiles. So AmericanRightToLife.org/Bible. Or if you just click in the right column on the Bible and abortion, you will find every passage in the Bible about the baby in the womb and whether or not it's right to kill a child for the crime of his father, which of course it's wrong. And that means abortion for rape is wrong, because it doesn't matter if your father's a criminal. God says the son shall not bear the guilt of the father, but the father will bear his own guilt. And of course, you love the child and you protect the child.
And you're a pastor, Bob. I want to ask you this. Obviously, we know this is wrong, but like the homosexual agenda, we see they have published a Queen James Bible, a duplicate of the King James Bible minus the change of 8 verses, which take away the mentioning of homosexuality as a sin. Do you think we'll get to the point where we see some type of Bible that includes the allowance of abortion?
Well, we in a tragic way, we're on the road to that. Focus on the Family, to their credit, had a Bible recall a while back where they were selling NIV Bibles, and the publisher of the NIV put out a gender-neutral version of the Bible, and they were selling it in England. But the American church tends to be more conservative, so they were not selling it here in America. Well, Focus on the Family, maybe somebody on their staff knew, but maybe no one knew. Somehow they ended up selling to their audience the gender-neutral versions of the Bible. When Christians realized what had happened and were devastated, they brought it to their attention. I thank God that James Dobson, that his heart was soft before the Lord, and he acknowledged what they did. He apologized, and they did a recall. So the NIV already has a gender-neutral version, and we're seeing that their efforts to retranslate the Bible so that people will no longer even know when they read a Bible that God condemns homosexuality because it leads to death. A sin is the behavior that leads to death. And that's why God warns us against sin. Not because he's a party pooper, but because he loves us. And he doesn't want us to destroy our lives, our children, our families, and he wants us to live forever with him. And homosexuality hardens the heart of men and women against the Lord when they have emptied the cup of lust to its dregs, and there's nothing left to satiate their lust, then they turn to homosexuality.
Bob, if I can just say a couple of things here, if I can interject a couple of things. What we're seeing, in my view anyway, and why this is important, why we're talking about this today, why now, in the wake of these despicable human beings that probably should have, these despicable human beings, why this is important to all of us. Here in the, if the Supreme Court could render an opinion that aborting a preborn infant or an infant period, if they can rule that or opine that that's a protected right, even though it's not found in the Constitution, clearly they're going way out of their venue to say this or to do this, then it's likely, and we should expect that they're going to have the flexibility now to add other rights, as we saw with the homosexual business here. In the near future, I believe that we can expect things like laws that will be created to criminalize all public expressions of the Christian religion. And we're looking at severe penalties for those who would pray, for example, at any public event, if the prayer, even if the prayer is voluntary, or if the prayer is specific to Jesus, unless it's denominationally neutral, and even then you're on iffy ground. You're going to see public crosses removed. No memorial in the shape of a cross will be permitted. This is coming. Hate crime laws, with the assertion, I believe, that hate speech is verbal violence, and see, that's coming, and I think in some places that's already there, and that's going to make, in a way, criticism of homosexuals or Muslims, yes, Muslims, punishable, even, I believe, if the remarks are made within the walls, or maybe even especially if they're made within the walls of a church or a Jewish synagogue. And I think that even readings from the Bible, or I remember being with Coach Dave Dobmeyer when he read passages from the Bible in the course of the Supreme, or the steps of the Supreme Court on June 14th. We were there at the initial opening of that, and that's going to be rendered the hate speech, and it's going to be a criminal act to do that in public. And I can go on and on and on. Really, the larger view here, I believe, is this is a war against all Americans. I mean, it's worldwide, but if you're listening to this in America, and I know we have overseas listeners, but think about this: America being the beacon of freedoms, supposedly, we are going to see the complete annihilation of of all Christianity, of anything Christian, of the middle class in particular. And how I arrive at that is basically the connection between the middle class and the Christians, the Christian business owners, and such. But we're looking at really eugenics. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, economic freedom comes from a Christian worldview, because God said, "Thou shalt not steal," and the right to life comes from a Christian worldview, because God said, "Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill the innocent." And the right to due process comes from a Christian, and of course, a Judeo-Christian worldview, because God said, "Do not bear false witness against your neighbor." The Ten Commandments has the foundation for a criminal justice system within them. Literally, the Ten Commandments prohibit perjury. If you commit perjury, if you bear false witness against your neighbor, then you've broken one of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments helps establish guilt in a criminal case, because when we look at motive, the Ten Commandments say, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife." So when there's a man having an affair with his neighbor's wife, and the neighbor is killed, and then that man having the affair with the wife is one of the top suspects. So you want to look very carefully when you investigate to see if, in fact, he's the murderer. So God put so much brilliance into the law that he gave through Israel to the world, then through the Ten Commandments. And in our government and our culture, they mock God, they reject everything of the Lord, and they call evil good and good evil. So that middle class that arose because of our recognition that we have the right to own private property, because God said, "Thou shalt not steal." And not even the government has the authority to break God's law, not even the government. So there are some Christians who make a historical error. They say that the idea of a republic where even the government has to obey the law, they say that goes back to the ancient Greeks, like Solon of Athens. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that claim. So
Yes.
We've heard that claim. And we realize that the Christians who repeat that, they're forgetting about Moses, because Moses wrote almost 1,000 years before Solon of Athens. And God inspired Moses to write that even the king must obey the law, that the king is not above the law. So this idea of a government where the governing officials need to humble themselves before the law, that they're not above the law, that's a biblical idea. That's not a pagan Greek idea. It's a biblical idea. And yet so many of our Christian political leaders, they don't want to refer to the Bible. George W. Bush praised, he said wonderful things about the Quran, about Muhammad, about Islam, dozens of times. I don't remember him ever saying anything wonderful about Jesus Christ. But Islam.
No. And now look where that that whole greasing the skids brought us. It brought us really Barack Hussein Obama. I believe he's a cultural Marxist Muslim. That's my personal belief. But see, being mouthy or wishy-washy on these subjects leads to this incremental destruction. And we get the government we work for, earn, and deserve. Well, I suppose an argument can be made that we deserve the likes of Barry Soetoro, Bathhouse Barry in the White House because we said nothing. We did not act, at least Anyway, yeah, I don't want to rant.
When you said, well, no, Doug, I need to hear your rants. That's what I need to hear. When you said earlier that they're trying to outlaw, step by step, they are outlawing public expressions from the church and of Christianity. There's a video that went viral on YouTube. It's called The Thaw, and it's made by Christian kids who are attending public schools. And personally, we don't let our kids go to any gun-free zone. We think gun-free zones are way too dangerous. And we've been saying that on the air for 20 years. And even in the last few days before the Chattanooga murders, and those were gun-free zones. Gun-free zones are dangerous. We don't let our kids go to a gun-free zone. So we wouldn't let our kids go to a public school because public schools are dangerous. Oh, and by the way, I know I'm on a tangent, but remember that Abraham Lincoln said that no foreign soldier could by force take a drink from the Ohio or lay a track on the Blue Ridge.
Right.
Well, I went to Google Maps and I searched for Blue Ridge, and they pulled up the Blue Ridge region, and right in the shaded color of the Blue Ridge region was Chattanooga. So it horrifies me to think that a Muslim terrorist has laid a track on the Blue Ridge.
Isn't that
and it's because it's just devastating. And it's because we have a president who will not use the might of America, not even to save Muslims who are being beheaded by other Muslims. When they put out that video a week ago of a 10-year-old boy taking an adult Syrian officer who was handcuffed with his hands behind his back and laying on the ground, and ISIS put out a video as clear as could be on HGTV of this 10-year-old boy taking a small knife and beheading this Syrian man. It's that crime more than any other crime that would cause me to take the full might of the American military and to destroy any Muslim in the world who would claim to support jihad. If you claim to support jihad, you are at war with America, you are the enemy, and you need to be destroyed. But Barack Obama is willing to watch the slaughter of Muslims by the thousands because he's godless and he's weak and he's a coward.
Amen. Yeah, there's nothing really to add to that except, Bob, when in 2007, 2008, we stood up. We had I appeared on various radio programs back then. I wrote articles. Barack Hussein Obama is not constitutionally eligible to hold the office of president. And by the way, let's get a couple of things out of here. Ted Cruz, and nor is Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio eligible according to Section 1, Article 2, Section 1, of the Constitution of the United States. And it's clearly defined. And people can argue this ad nauseum. But you know what? The spineless, gutless mouthpieces, the people behind the microphones who said nothing, or even worse, looked at us and said, "You're a bunch of fruitcakes," or it's a diversion. We ought not to talk about this, or it's laughable because really it's a diversion. Let's attack the man, or let's go after the man on his on the merits of his issues, on the issues. Well, look, we see where his issue or where I can't even. Yeah, I get the duct tape.
Well, Barack Obama grew up in a Muslim country, attending a majority Muslim school.
Yeah.
And he grew up with adults around him who hated Jesus Christ, who hated America. And so we did elect the enemy, but that's the norm. That since Adam ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the midst of the garden, human beings have been sabotaging their own health and well-being. We've been sabotaging ourselves So we've done that with Barack Obama. And what was so bizarre about that was Mitt Romney was actually worse than Barack Obama. If anybody looks at the pro-life profile of Mitt Romney, they will quickly see that he was more godless and more socialist and more of a child killer. And people say, well, how could that be? I'd love to give a quick example. I know you guys have covered this. But Mitt Romney is the father of Obamacare. Mitt Romney is. His chief architect went to the White House about a dozen times to help Barack Obama craft Obamacare. And Obamacare has the hated individual mandate because Romneycare had the hated individual mandate. And unlike Obamacare, Romneycare paid for abortion on demand from day one, out of the box. At least Obama had the courtesy to lie to us and to say Obamacare would not provide for abortion and it would not provide for illegal aliens. At least Obama had the courtesy to lie to us. Romney didn't even lie to us. He just paid for even late-term abortion on demand with tax-funded government health care reform called Romneycare from day one. So Mitt Romney accomplished way more to help Planned Parenthood with basic Obamacare than Barack Obama has done. Mitt Romney put Planned Parenthood on the state health board. He gave them a permanent seat so they could decide what health procedures would be covered under Romneycare. And do you think Planned Parenthood might decide to cover abortion? So they created $50 copay abortions. Unless you don't have a lot of money, then it's zero copay. The taxpayers pay it all. And it wasn't just the taxpayers of Massachusetts, because Mitt Romney, he negotiated with the federal government to get tens of millions of dollars of federal tax dollars to subsidize his socialist healthcare reform called Romneycare. Mitt Romney ordered county clerks to issue homosexual marriage licenses. He ordered them against state law and against their state constitution. He ordered them. Mitt Romney ordered pro-life hospitals to dispense the abortion pill, the abortifacient, Plan B, the morning after pill. And that was against his legal counsel in the executive branch and against his own health department chief. Mitt Romney ordered Catholic charities to adopt out children to homosexuals. Mitt Romney had a war against religious liberties. But the insanity of Focus on the Family and the insanity of National Right to Life, saying that Mitt Romney is a pro-life, pro-family leader who will protect our religious liberties, they lied at every turn to support a socialist, tax and spend, big government, child-killing, pro-sodomite, anti-family politician. And why would they do that to us? Why would James Dobson do that? And so we love James Dobson. We don't hate him. We love him. And I have no doubt he loves the Lord, and he's going to heaven, and he's led far more people to the Lord than I ever have. But when Focus on the Family put out a political video with Tom Minery, their vice president of public policy, saying, here at Focus on the Family, we are so much like Mitt Romney, so we support Mitt Romney. We realize, he's actually telling the truth. They are like Mitt Romney. They are, because they misrepresent child killers and the enemies of marriage to get people to give money to Republicans and vote Republican. When we have Roe v. Wade because of the Republican Party and the Republican judges. And I'm a Republican.
Bob, what are we going to do about this? All right. Look, at this point, I look at the justice system broken, shattered. no
Yeah.
confidence. I look at the all three branches of government basically gone. America, it's on life support. Even
Morality
yeah.
disappeared.
So I'm to the point now where I'm looking at getting some pretty hefty hemp rope and going down to the town square, okay, and start getting a posse together and going out. If no one else is going to, I mean, we need to do something. What can we
Well,
do to expose this and to stop
yeah.
this wholesale slaughter? I want answers, and I want these people. I want these people to be brought before or to be brought in front of the court of public opinion, if there is such a thing anymore, or legal court. I want them prosecuted for the crimes that they're committing, and I want the very people who enable them to be right there with them, and anyone else who, like Mitt Romney, anyone else who deceives intentionally, I want them held accountable too. But what do we do?
Sadly, the court of
What do
public
we do?
opinion is Fox News and the major news stations, as they claim in their motto, shaping public opinion.
Yeah, well, I've had enough shaping, but Bob, I want answers.
Yeah.
I want to know
Yeah.
what to do. I want to, seriously, man, we have to do something. We have to, in my view, there's 41 companies that I know of. Thank you, Linda B., who sent, that fund, Planned Parenthood, from Adobe to Xerox and everyone in between, Clorox, Coca-Cola, Converse. I'm going to take my size 11 Converse while wearing my Levi Strauss.
You
And
got to quit drinking your Starbucks, which
that ain't happening either. I mean, no, it's done. It's over.
Yeah.
Bank of America, all this, but we have to stop. I mean, we got to do something. Help me. What do we do?
Well, the things we need to do are the things that God calls on his people to do in all times, and especially in times of crisis. The things we can't do are usurp governmental authority for ourselves. Remember that King David, God had already, through the prophet Samuel, told King David that he was the next king. He was the next king. So imagine that. If God came down and said, after Barack Obama leaves office, it's going to be Joe Hagmann is going to be the next leader of America. I mean, we'd be ecstatic, right? But
I wouldn't want
King
the job,
Saul.
but thank you.
Oh man, I'd be sweating. All right.
But King Saul was a murderer. Not only was King Saul a murderer, he was killing the innocent. And David had the opportunity to use the sword and bring vengeance. But if you recall, he did not, because he said, that he would not strike out against the Lord's anointed. So at AmericanRightToLife.org, there is a vigilante worksheet. And the worksheet goes through the biblical principles of force and when we could use force. And of course, we could use force to defend our own lives, to defend the lives of our neighbors. In other words, anyone around us who's about to be killed. You could use force to defend life and limb. But there are also very clear circumstances like what David was in right then. And even though he was anointed to be the very next king, where he could not use force. And then God looked at David, and even with all David's sin, God said, David is a man after my own heart, because he had the passion to know what was right and wrong, but he also had the restraint. So we need both. And we need to expose the wickedness, but even more than that, we need to know the Lord and know his word. And the more we know God's word, the more we will have the right answer at the right moment for those who need to be encouraged and to be strengthened. So that's why, like you said earlier, Doug, at our talk show, we don't only have our Bob Enyart Live talk show. We also have Theology Thursday, where we air our sermons and our Bible studies, because Christians need to be equipped. Our pastors cannot handle the milk, so we need to go over their heads and go to the members of the church, the members of the flock, and we need to equip them so they can handle the meat. And we also have, every Friday, we do a show called Real Science Radio, where we take on some of the world's leading scientists who are atheists or evolutionists, and we debate them from a biblical Christian worldview, because abortion is only wrong because God made us. If there is no God who made us in his image, then abortion cannot be wrong. But if God made us in his image and likeness, then abortion is murder. And so that's why we spend a lot of time teaching people that Jesus Christ was right, what he said about creation, that God made us male and female at the beginning of the creation, not after billions of years or millions of years, but at the beginning of the creation in Genesis chapter 1, God made us male and female. And so that's why we take the time to do the news of the day and the politics and Obama and, you know, whether it's Ted Cruz or Rubio, like you said, these are pretty much establishment candidates. And Donald Trump is obviously a rhino in the worst sense of that term. So we do that during the week, but then we do Theology Thursday, and then we do Real Science Radio so that Christians could be equipped to not be ashamed when God says that he made us, he really did make us. We did not evolve from worms or from ape-like creatures. We're made in God's image. And then we talk about the global flood and the way God created the solar system and the universe, and it's really the most exciting opportunity to build up people in their faith that they can trust God's word.
Well, you know what, Bob? Let's take this opportunity, if you don't mind. Let's talk about Real Science Radio. Let's talk about your findings. You shared with me something earlier. Folks are going to kind of switch gears here. Our guest tonight, is Bob Enyart. Bob Enyart Live. If you go to KGov, that's KGOV.com. That's his home base. He also has the prolifeprofiles.com, but Real Science Radio. If you don't mind, let's talk about that, because when we spoke earlier today, you had some pretty interesting things to say, from Pluto to dinosaurs. And yes, folks, all of this is relevant to the things we're seeing going on today. Do you mind talking about this?
No, not at all, Doug. Thank you for asking. Because this past Friday, NASA, I mean, what a tremendous accomplishment to send a spacecraft, New Horizons, 3 billion miles away to pass Pluto and its moon Charon. Pluto has 5 moons. Charon is the largest. On Real Science Radio, we reported from their first findings. And as happens every time, the atheist, the materialist, NASA, the old earthers, the Big Bang proponents, they are shocked by what they find, and every time the young earth creationists are elated and ecstatic at what we find, because what we find affirms the book of Genesis. Okay, so here's what NASA expected. And at realscienceradio.com, you could see an artist rendition of what they thought Pluto would look like. And it looks like a beat-up old rock that's as dirty as could be, because they think Pluto would be a heavily cratered body, grimy from sweeping up billions of years of space dust. That's what they thought Pluto would be. They were shocked by what they found. Pluto looks young, just like the Earth looks young. When you see a picture of the Earth from space, the Earth looks young. Pluto, vast swaths of the surface of Pluto have snow that even NASA said is as bright as a fresh snow on the Antarctic. It's bright. It looks fresh. How should it look fresh? It's so far out. It's such a small body. It should be geologically inert. It should be dead, so no heat within it. And the surface should have been picking up comets, craters, not comets, but impactors and craters and dust for billions of years. And when they find so much of it as bright as could be, and huge swaths of it without craters, they literally said that they were shocked that it blew their socks off because it contradicted their old Earth model, while every one of those discoveries affirms a young Earth view of Pluto. And Sharon, the moon Sharon, the exact same thing. So that's just 1 week on Real Science Radio. And we also looked at their nebular hypothesis, how they think that the planets would form around a star. And it turns out that many of the world's leading astronomers, even the Big Bang proponents, even the guys at NASA, say, you know what? We have no idea how planets would form because our theory is completely wrong. They have utterly disproven their theory of planetary formation, the nebular hypothesis. So when that happens, it is so exciting for Christians to be right there, to be able to celebrate the fact that the discoveries that disprove the Big Bang at the same time confirm the truth of God's Word. And then, Doug, I think we also talked about dinosaurs. Is that right?
Yeah, fast. Yes, and your news. This is fascinating. What you're, and the implications are extreme. So go ahead, sir.
Yes, the greatest discovery in the history of paleontology has just occurred, where they have discovered, and this has been published in every leading scientific journal, like the Journal of Nature and Science, and Journal of Paleontology, and the Proceedings of the Royal Academy, and so on, all of them. They have published that when they're breaking open dinosaur bones, they're finding soft tissue inside. And by soft tissue, they mean blood vessels that are transparent and flexible, and inside of the blood vessels, blood cells, red blood cells. They've got hemoglobin. I'm talking about from dinosaurs like from T-Rex and from hadrosaurs and from half a dozen different dinosaurs. They're finding many different kinds of soft tissue. It's called dinosaur soft tissue, and it is so far the best kept secret in the field of paleontology, because while they've been publishing in their own science journals, Bill O'Reilly, he doesn't read science journals. We do every week. We've read hundreds of articles in the world's leading science journals because they affirm the truth that God made us in the recent past. But Bill O'Reilly, he wouldn't know dinosaur soft tissue from a hole in the ground. But he needs to. He needs to educate himself about God's Word, because if you break open the bone of an Egyptian mummy from in a grave in Egypt of a pharaoh, they find that the bone is desiccated. It's decomposed. All the biological material is decayed. I said all, but not really, because they find trace bits that are still soft, like collagen and many other proteins. Well, it turns out, like histone proteins that DNA is wrapped around, it turns out when they break open dinosaur bones, they find the exact same thing. So therefore, the dinosaur bones cannot be 68 million years old. They can't be 80 million years old. When they found original biological material in an Archaeopteryx fossil, in the feathers of Archaeopteryx, it turns out it just can't be 140 million years old. It can't be. And so no matter where in the fossil record, the geologic column, no matter where they break open the fossils, as deep as the record goes, they find soft tissue, even in Precambrian fossils. So, and this confirmed, Doug, this confirmed a prediction we made, two predictions on Real Science Radio. One was that they would find soft tissue in dinosaur bones, not rarely, but wherever they look. And that has now been confirmed. Just about 4 weeks ago, the journal Nature published a paper. They took 8 dinosaur bones from the Museum of Natural History in London, and they tested them all for soft tissue. They found original dinosaur biological tissue in 6 of the 8 bones, 6 of them. So our prediction as creationists that dinosaurs are young. They're only thousands of years old. As we read in the Bible, God created dinosaurs, at least the land-dwelling dinosaurs, on the same day that he created man, Adam and Eve. And he created the marine, extinct marine, we'd call him a dinosaur today, but say a mosasaur, an extinct marine reptile, which we also have soft tissue from a mosasaur. The atheists think the mosasaur went extinct 80 million years ago. But we have soft tissue from a mosasaur bone, and it's a little bone at that. It's a small bone, and it has carbon-14 in it, which also means it could only be thousands of years old, not millions. So God made the mosasaur on day 5 with the sea creatures and dolphins and whales and all the fish of the sea. On day 6, he made the land animals, and the pinnacle of his creation was mankind, when he lovingly made Adam and then Eve on that same day. And so we know that dinosaurs are young. We're putting out a video called Jurassic, and in fact, I'd like to break this news, Doug and Joe, on your show. There's a YouTube filmmaker who has 118,000 subscribers, and he has 12 million views on his channel. His name is Trey Smith. He makes videos on Genesis and creation.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, you may have seen his videos. He loves the Lord. His videos are a little different than the kind of videos I do, you know. But people are drawn toward it because there's so much truth in what he shows the world. So he flew out to Denver, and he's just taped an interview with me on dinosaur soft tissue, and Trey is getting ready to release in August his newest film, Jurassic, on dinosaur soft tissue. And so we're praying. Many of his videos get, 1 to 2 million views. So we're praying to reach 1 million people with the truth that God created us in the recent past. We are not animals. We're not overachieving worms. It's not okay to kill babies. It's not okay for men to commit perversions with one another. We need to get to know God and to honor him and to obey him.
Exactly. And I think, through Real Science Radio and how you connect the dots on all of these issues, what you're doing, to me anyway, is providing scientific documentation to authenticate the accuracy, not that it needs authentication, of the Holy Bible.
Right, exactly.
And this has an impact on the people who put their faith in scientists who say, well, it's 168 billion years ago this happened and that happened. Well, okay, I'd much rather go to the Bible and get my information from the Bible as opposed to anywhere else, because at least I'm sure of the information. So you connect the dots. You connect the dots.
Exactly.
And so this is fantastic. And we talked earlier, just to pop back to Pluto one more time. We talked earlier too of the significance. I do want to point out, folks, that last week was a flyby of Pluto. Pluto being the representation of the name of the god of the underworld, if you will. There's some significance there to the events and the findings and such. I don't necessarily want to get into that, but go ahead.
Doug, I think you're right. It's uncanny, because a few years back when they declassified Pluto as a planet, I didn't like that because I grew up with Pluto, and it's a romantic notion, but when I controlled myself and not just had a knee-jerk reaction against anything scientists say, because that's a mistake, because even atheist scientists have made amazing discoveries, but it's mostly the Christian scientists who've been the fathers of all the major branches of the physical sciences, from Isaac Newton on down. But when they said Pluto doesn't meet the qualifications of a planet, I tried to restrain myself and looked at it, and it looks like they're right. It looks like Pluto is part of the brokenness of the cosmos that came as a result of sin. So the planets, the 8 planets, orbit the sun in the ecliptic in a plane. The Earth has an amazingly circular orbit. And thank God we do, because otherwise all life on Earth could be fried or frozen. So God fine-tuned the solar system with our moon and the sun in the most amazing way, but Pluto is out of whack. Its orbit is elongated, so we say it has a very high eccentricity, and it's very much out of the plane of the ecliptic, of the planets. And because of that, half the time Neptune is further away from the sun than Pluto is. Half the time Pluto is closer to the sun than Neptune because it's got this weird elongated orbit. And it turns out there are 70,000 bodies outside Neptune. They're called trans-Neptunian objects. And those objects are very similar to asteroids, to comets, to meteoroids. And these things are the mavericks of the solar system, and they're actually deadly, because when they come to the Earth, they could kill people, and they beat up the things that God made. God made a beautiful moon and Venus and Mars, and they've been beat up badly. The near side of the moon was beat far more ferociously than was the far side. The far side is sprinkled with impacts, craters. The near side was pummeled with these 5 massive, they call them mass concentrations, enormous impacts that made much of the surface of the moon molten. But that's the near side. And so something went wrong after God's perfect creation. Something went wrong to destroy the perfection, not only of the Earth, but of the solar system. And we cover that in exhilarating detail, scientifically and biblically, on Real Science Radio. We make videos on the global flood. And Doug and Joe, it couldn't be more fun to learn science with God as your tutor.
I like that. I like that. And as you mentioned, the trans-Newtonian objects, I just wonder if they're confused about their planetary identity, but I guess we'll leave that for another day. That didn't.
Yeah, I guess that'd be Bruce Jenner, right? So Bruce Jenner could say he's a woman. And the gal who was the head of the NAACP, she said she was black. Well, what's the difference? Why can't she say she's a black male? Obviously, she could say she's a black man. I mean, I think Michael Jackson proved that a poor black boy could grow up to be a rich white woman. So I think anything could happen. I think there are no longer standards in America or even in the world.
That's true. I mean, the expanding moral relativism, the lack of the lack of black and white, the 50 shades of gray, pun intended. It's really ridiculous. And it's high time where we as Christians and we as just people of common sense identify good versus evil, right versus wrong, black versus white. There is no I'm really white, but I'm black and identify with, I'm confused. No, let's just deal with, what we've.
Yes, because I'm sorry for interrupting, but God says in the Bible, in the New Testament, It affirms the Old Testament, that all nations, God made all nations from one blood. We are all brothers and sisters in that sense. God made Adam and Eve. We're all descended from Adam and Eve, and then there was a genetic bottleneck at the time of the global flood through Noah and his wife and their 3 sons and their daughter-in-laws, and that genetic bottleneck we could even identify when we sequence the genomes of human beings around the world. We can see all this. This is all real. And so Charles Darwin was a racist. I mean, he hated blacks. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, I know you've documented this so well on your program, Hagmann Hagmann, but Margaret Sanger was a racist. The Scopes monkey trial, that our dear friend Fred Foote made a movie on the Scopes monkey trial, not Hollywood's Inherit the Wind, but this one is called Alleged. And in Alleged, they show the biology textbook that the ACLU was defending. It was called Hunter's Civic Biology. And in that book, it showed that blacks and Jews were close to apes. It was a racist, which was typical of Charles Darwin, who was a racist. And he described minorities, not white Europeans. He thought white Europeans were, highly civilized and advanced. But Charles Darwin described minorities as closer to gorillas and apes.
Where have we heard that before?
Oh yeah, that and that's on American Right to Life's website. The words Charles Darwin, in his own words, linked right to his own writings.
Fantastic. Bob, we've only got about 7 minutes left of the program. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. It's just been a marvelous, informative time. I'm going to just turn it back to you. You just take the last 7 minutes, wherever you want to take us, whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to drive home, because otherwise I'm going to be looking to form a posse here and go grab me some Planned Parenthood criminals. But so help me.
I understand, and I think we need to benefit from the wisdom of David, who had all the passion that we have to see the wickedness, even in the governing leaders, like in King Saul, but also had the self-control to realize that we need to stand up for the innocent and do what's right, but there are limits. So I'd like to go back to the very first thing we started with on tonight's program, which was why abortion is wrong. And if anybody ever goes to American Right to Life's website, they'll see the top item on their list of resources. Abortion is wrong. Why abortion is wrong? Abortion is wrong because it's a baby. And it's always wrong to intentionally kill a baby. And that's because children are made in God's image, and God said, do not kill the innocent. It could not be simpler than an acknowledgement that God made us. But many years ago, National Right to Life made a strategic decision. And this is why we put out a documentary series called Focus on the Strategy. And they decided that when they advocate for public policy, they're not going to talk about God. They'd only talk about God in their fundraisers to their supporters, in their mailings and so on. But when they advocate public policy, they're not going to talk about God. They said that we're going to win this based on the laws of science. So we hijacked one of their national conferences just a couple of years ago in Washington, D.C. They were at the Hyatt. We rented the penthouse of the Hyatt. And we showed Focus on the Strategy. We had a buffet 24/7, the best food, the best drinks, and hundreds of their convention goers came up to the penthouse. We handed them beautiful tickets for free food and drink up at the penthouse. And we showed them National Right to Life's betrayal when they said, we're going to win this based on the laws of science. And we asked the question, which of the laws of science use the words right and wrong? Which of the laws of science have the terms right and wrong? I mean, is it in chemistry? Because I studied chemistry in high school. Is it the laws of physics? Is it Kepler's laws of planetary motion? I mean, which of the laws of science could tell you that it's wrong to kill a baby? And there is not one. There is not a single law of science that could determine whether a chemical weapon, if it's going to kill a certain number of people, whether it's right or wrong to use it. So we realized that the pro-life movement had to be called back to God. And so there is a personhood movement today in America. And the personhood movement is a Bible-based pro-life movement. It's based on God creating us as Jesus affirmed in the Bible. It's not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not ashamed of the account that the Lord gave us in the book of Genesis. And so it is only there that we can know right from wrong, and then we have the power of God to reach people. So in Colorado, we've gone to a statewide ballot now 3 times with Amendment 48, and we got trounced really badly. We got 27% of the vote. Then we came back a few years later with Amendment 62. It's called the Personhood Amendment. It's that the baby in the womb is a person. And we did better, but we still got beat 29%. Then we came back with Amendment 67 a few years later, and we got 34%. So we went from 27 to 29 to now more than 1 in 3 people in the liberal state of Colorado voting to say that the baby is a person. And when we got that improvement in our vote, that's when the Democrats were up 5 points nationwide on Democrats going to the polls and Republicans being discouraged because the Republican Party keeps giving us Democrats wolves in sheep clothing like Mitt Romney. So 3 million people, 3 million Republicans did not vote in the last election for president because they knew that Mitt Romney was a Democrat. Mitt Romney was a socialist, pro-sodomite, anti-marriage, anti-family, pro-abortion, political politician. That's who Mitt Romney was. So you could have Barack Obama, who was the lesser of 2 evils, who we opposed vociferously because he's evil, or you could have Mitt Romney. So what we need to realize is that our child killer is worse than the other guy's child killer. The child killer who I support is the worst child killer. If ISIS kills a child, or if Franklin Graham killed a child, what would be worse? What would be more devastating? What would do greater harm to the gospel of Jesus Christ? If ISIS kills a child or if Frankie Graham kills a child? Well, of course. Right. So when your politician kills children, he is the worst politician that you need to oppose, and we need to obey Jesus Christ and not look for excuses to defend child killers.
Wow.
Amen.
You know, some people might say, well, that's a little twisted in terms of logic, but no, it kind of goes back to, you know, anyone who's raised kids knows that, you know, they're with a friend and they both get into trouble. Okay, well, you know, you really don't necessarily expect your child, perhaps, to be the worst of the two, or the, you know.
Boy, were you surprised.
Yeah, is I surprised personally. But anyway, Bob, it's been a pleasure. We're at the end of the program. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. Go ahead and please plug your website.
Well, thank you, man, so much. What an honor to be on with you, Joe, and you, Doug. Doug, you did a great job raising this son of yours. We're all blessed because of that. Our website, Pro-Life Profiles, that lets you know the actual track record of people who you're being lied about to on Fox News. as Pro-Life Profiles. There's American Right to Life, the organization I'm on the board of, AmericanRightToLife.org. And then our radio show is kgov.com, like government, kgov.com, because west of the Mississippi, all radio station call letters start with a K, not a W. So kgov.com. And then finally, Real Science Radio for those who love science and the whole creation evolution debate. And that's it.
Bob, that's fantastic. We hope to have you back again. Thank you so very much. God bless. Yes, and we'll talk
what an
again
honor,
soon.
guys. Thank
All
you
right,
both
brother.
so much.
Take care.
God bless.
All right.
Thank you both.
Folks, tomorrow night, Steve Quayle, Pastor Langford. Until tomorrow, God bless. Stay safe.